Greetings, everyone. It's just past 9:30 in the morning over here in Tehran. You're watching us live. This is Press TV. Welcome. Iraq's new prime minister says Baghdad will review its strategic agreement with the United States. Mustafa al-Kadhimi said after his government's first cabinet meeting that Baghdad will hold talks with the U.S. to ensure Iraq's unity and sovereignty are protected. He said a crisis committee has been formed for the purpose. Earlier, Kadhimi also told U.S. ambassador that he will not allow the Iraqi soil to be used for attacks on regional friends in neighboring countries. Iraq and the United States signed their strategic framework agreement in 2008. Recent U.S. strikes on the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces and assassination of their commanders have raised doubts in Baghdad whether the agreement serves Iraq's national security. Let's discuss this with Mr. Jason Unruhe. He's a political commentator and analyst who joins us via Skype out of Ontario. Jason, it's good to see you. Tell me, how significant do you think what Mr. Kadhimi is saying about this agreement is?
Well, it's certainly very significant. One of the hardest things to do when you don't want to be a puppet of the United States imperialist agenda is to maintain your own independence. And one of the most important things someone could do in order to push that is to not allow their country to be used as a staging point for invading other countries. And we saw before the Iraq War, many of Iraq's neighbors who were essentially clients of U.S. imperialism allowed them to use essentially their land in order to stage offenses against Iraq, overthrow the country, and essentially what created this political mess to begin with, going all the way back to 2003. It's a very difficult position. I think that many of the leaders who have been in Iraq are very much between a rock and a hard place. They want to present the idea that they're not serving U.S. interests and that they're defending their own people, while essentially they are under the thumb of U.S. pressure. That makes it very difficult to walk the line in between the two. If you were to just simply say to the U.S., leave, never come back, that would be very difficult politically, if not impossible, for the United States to actually take. I mean, the current prime minister has certainly been very friendly with the United States. He has worked with more than one publication, particularly the Iraqi end of Newsweek magazine. So he is very well versed in what the U.S. position towards things are, and has in the past essentially been very adamant in forwarding those interests. So I see that there's probably a great deal of mistrust towards him regarding this situation. I mean, when you're talking about maintaining your country's independence, having good relations with the premier imperialist power in the world is probably going to throw a lot of skepticism your way, and that's going to cause a lot of people to mistrust you. And that's something that if he wants to forward this idea, he's going to have to overcome, and that's very difficult to do considering Iraq has been suffering at the hands of the United States since 2003, and that becomes politically very difficult for other sides in the current, say, political power structure inside of Iraq right now to deal with. And I think that's probably a primary concern with many of them, especially given that, previous, popular, essentially anti-ISIS Iraqi fighters have been bombed by the United States, and the assassination of Soleimani. I mean, these are very clearly not acts that are respecting the sovereignty and the will of the Iraqi people. So it's very clear the United States does not have Iraq's best interests at heart. So if you already know that, and then you know that your prime minister is very close to the United States, it becomes very difficult to trust any statement that he has regarding protecting Iraq's sovereignty.
Something else that I find it hard to explain is the fact that I'm pretty sure you remember within the past few months the Iraq has been without a government, and during the previous governments, the country of Iraq were given exemptions in terms of buying Iranian energy, be it gas and electricity, for periods of 1 month or 2 months, and all of a sudden with this new government they have been extended by 4 months. That's a good sign from the United States and a good beacon to the to the Iraqis that things are going all right by the U.S. And at the same time, there is this talk that we want to review our ties with the U.S. as far as this agreement is concerned. How do you explain that, Jason?
Well, it's certainly, as I said, a difficult situation where you're trying to express your own sovereignty as a country, trying to seek out whatever resources is you need in order to be able to function. Everybody needs to trade. There is no country in the world that can survive without trade. Everybody needs it. However, the U.S. is projecting their imperialist ambitions on Iraq by saying, well, we really don't want you trading with Iran because we're trying to destabilize their country and create, the very typical regime change kind of scenario inside the country. And that makes it very difficult when you have another country telling you who you can and can't trade with. It would be very advantageous for Iraq to continue to have such a trade relationship with Iran. I mean, the two countries are right next to each other. This makes the shipping of any goods, and particularly something as expensive to move as gas and oil, energy resources in general, much cheaper. And that's something that would be very much to the benefit of Iraq. But I think the main thing here is that the United States does not want to allow countries in the Middle East to cooperate in a way that does not forward U.S. interests. This becomes a challenge to their power, a challenge to their hegemony, and that's something they have to interfere in. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that serving U.S. interests cannot be served at the same time as serving your own interests independent of the U.S. The old saying that you can't serve two masters. And I think that's the real political quandary that Iraq is in right now. I think a lot of people want complete and absolute freedom from U.S. domination, but that is very hard to do politically when the United States wields so much power over not just the world market, but over your country in general.
Right. Thank you very, very much. That's Mr. Jason Unruhe, political commentator and analyst out of Ontario via Skype.